Mortal Kombat's fatalities were so violent they triggered a United States Senate hearing in 1993 and directly led to the creation of the ESRB rating system. These aren't just video game finishing moves. They literally changed how an entire industry is regulated. So today we're ranking the most brutal fatalities in Mortal Kombat history, from least gruesome to most savage. And the number one pick shocked players and policymakers alike. Finish him. Here's something most people don't know. For every single Mortal Kombat game, Ed Boon personally draws the very first fatality himself. He sketches it, motion captures it, and uses it to test the new blood and animation tech for that title. The first kill sets the tone for the entire game. That's how seriously NetherRealm takes these things. This isn't a franchise that happens to have gore. It's a franchise built around the art of the kill, and the world noticed immediately. When Mortal Kombat hit arcades in 1992, the violence was so extreme that US senators dragged it into a congressional hearing. They literally played fatality clips on the Senate floor. That single moment helped create the Entertainment Software Rating Board, the ESRB, the rating system that still governs every game sold in America today. One fighting game's finishing moves rewrote the rules for an entire industry. Let that sink in. But here's the thing. Despite decades of controversy, Ed Boon himself has said that the majority of people's reactions to Mortal Kombat fatalities is laughter, not fear. There's a committee at NetherRealm that reviews every fatality idea and can reject ones that go too much. But the bar for too much in this franchise is genuinely terrifying. So what we're doing today is ranking the most brutal, most creative, and most satisfying fatalities across the entire series. We're going from least gruesome to absolute peak savagery, so the best is saved for last. And I should mention, one entry on this list actually costs real money to unlock, which caused its own firestorm. Toasty. Here's the thing about Scorpion's Toasty. It's not the goriest fatality on this list. It's not the most technically impressive. It's not going to make you question your sanity. But it might be the most satisfying fatality ever created, and I can prove it. Let me explain. The Toasty fatality has been a staple since the early days of Mortal Kombat, and what happens on screen is genuinely bizarre. Scorpion doesn't just burn you. The opponent's body undergoes this grotesque skeletal transformation from the inside out, their torso twisting and splitting until the skull itself cracks apart. It's disgusting. But it's disgusting in this weirdly playful, almost cartoonish way that makes you laugh instead of look away. And that combination is exactly why it's legendary. Players have documented their love for this one across every corner of the internet. Reddit threads asking, what's the most popular fatality in EMK? Consistently see Toasty at the top. YouTube top 10 compilations feature it prominently. One notable compilation has it timestamped at 114, sitting right alongside the biggest names in the franchise. Community polls, fan rankings, tier lists, doesn't matter the format. Toasty shows up every single time. And it's not just nostalgia carrying this thing. The fatality got a modern cameo variant in Mortal Kombat 1 in 2020 with an actual documented input. Down, forward, down, cameo at mid-range. That makes it one of the few classic fatalities that successfully jumped from pixel art to photorealistic graphics and kept its identity intact. NetherRealm knew what they had and they preserved. Now, when you score this fatality on raw gore alone, it sits at maybe a 7 or 8 out of 10. Respectable, but not chart topping. But player satisfaction? That's a 9 out of 10. And that's what pushes it to an overall score of 83 out of 100 on our ranking. Because here's where it gets interesting. What makes a fatality truly brutal isn't always maximum blood and exposed organs. Sometimes it's personality. Sometimes it's the fact that a move is gross enough to shock your friend on the couch, but fun enough that you both immediately want to see it again. That's the Toasty effect. It lives in this perfect overlap between meme-worthy and brutal, between iconic and disgusting. It's the crowd pleaser, the one everybody knows. But if a crowd pleaser with moderate gore can score this high, imagine what happens when we get to the entries that combine that same level of player love with genuinely extreme violence. Because that's exactly where we're headed next. The God. Raiden has always been the god of thunder in Mortal Kombat. Literally. He's a deity fighting alongside mortals, which means his fatalities have always carried a little extra weight. And in Mortal Kombat 2, he proved exactly why. Here's how it works. Raiden grabs his opponent, channels lightning directly into their body, and just holds it. The electricity doesn't stop. The body convulses, shakes, and then detonates. Not burns, not disintegrates, detonates. The entire body explodes outward, and the opponent's severed head launches directly toward the camera in one of the most deliberately cinematic shots the early franchise ever attempted. And that camera choice is important. In 1993, most fatalities fatalities played out from a fixed side view. You watch them happen, but Raiden's explosion sends that head flying straight at you. The developers weren't just designing a finishing move, they were showing off. They wanted you to flinch. They wanted the kid standing behind you at the arcade to gasp, and it worked. Now, let's talk about what's actually happening here from a physics standpoint. A Game Informer feature brought in real physicists to analyze Mortal Kombat's most famous fatalities, and the verdict was exactly what you'd expect. Electrocuting a human body to the point of literal explosion would require energy levels so far beyond anything possible that the math basically breaks. The forces involved aren't just unrealistic, they're absurd. But here's the thing, Mortal Kombat has never cared about that, not once. Not in 1992, not in 2023. The franchise runs on spectacle, not science, and Raiden's MK2 fatality is a perfect example. This one scored a 78 out of 100 on our brutality scale, pulling high marks for graphic detail and physical destruction, an 8 out of 10 in both categories. For a game running on early 90s hardware, that's impressive. The pixelated explosion somehow still hits, because the timing is perfect and the camera trick sells the impact. But here's what makes this entry really interesting. Raiden shows up again on this list, much higher, because 30 years later, NetherRealm gave the Thunder God a brand new fatality in Mortal Kombat 1, the 2023 reboot, and the difference between what you just saw and what's coming later is almost incomprehensible. Same character, same lightning powers, but 3 decades of visual fidelity improvement turned Raiden from a fun arcade shock into something genuinely difficult to watch. We'll get there, trust me. For now though, the MK2 version deserves its spot. It was one of the first fatalities that felt like the game was reaching through the screen. And speaking of reaching through the screen, the next entry takes that concept of physical destruction and cranks it to a level that made Raiden's explosion look gentle, still beating. Ed Boon once said that the majority of people's reactions to Mortal Kombat fatalities is laughter, not fear. And honestly, for most of the entries on this list so far, he's right. Explosions are spectacle. Decapitations are over the top. You watch them, you laugh, you hit rematch. But Kano's heart rip is where that stops being true. This is the fatality that crosses a line the other entries haven't touched yet. No explosions, no supernatural powers, no dragons, no lightning, no freezing. Just a man reaching into another man's chest, tearing out their heart, and holding it up to the camera. Still beating, still pumping. Right there in his hand. And here's a fun detail that even the Mortal Kombat community can't agree on. Nobody is entirely sure which game this first appeared in. Some retrospectives place Kano's heart rip in the original 1992 Mortal Kombat, right alongside Sub-Zero's spine rip as one of the moves that started it all. Other sources attribute it to Mortal Kombat 3. Both claims show up in documented franchise breakdowns, and neither side has produced definitive archival proof that settles the argument. But honestly, that almost makes it better. Nobody can agree on when Kano first did this, but absolutely everyone agrees it's unforgettable. That's how powerful the image is. The debate over which game it debuted in has been going on for decades, and the fatality's reputation hasn't lost a single ounce of impact in that time. And the reason it hits different is because of what it shows you. The entries before this one destroyed bodies. Limbs came off, heads flew, spines got ripped. All brutal, sure, but organ exposure is a completely different category of disturbing. There's something primal about seeing a human heart outside of a body, still functioning, still contracting in someone's fist. It doesn't feel like a video game anymore. It feels medical, it feels wrong. That's the shift this fatality represents on the list. Everything before it was impressive. Everything from here on out is genuinely unsettling. Kano's heart rip scored an 88.5 out of 100 on our brutality scale, with a notably elevated controversy score because of its role in the broader public conversation about Mortal Kombat's violence. This is one of the fatalities people pointed to when they said games had gone too far. It showed up in retrospectives, in news segments, in parental concern discussions. It became a symbol. So yeah, Ed Boon says people laugh at fatalities, and maybe they do at most of them, but I'd love to see someone watch Kano hold a still beating heart 6 inches from the camera and tell me they're laughing. Because if the entries so far made you wince, the next one is going to make you look away entirely. The Dragon. Liu Kang is the hero of Mortal Kombat, the chosen one, the good guy, the character who's supposed to represent honor, discipline, and the protection of Earthrealm. And his signature fatality involves summoning twin mythological dragons that literally tear a human being in half. Let that sink in for a sec. The franchise's protagonist, the guy you're supposed to root for, has one of the most savage finishing moves in the entire series. And that's not an accident. Nobody is clean, not even the hero. Liu Kang's dragon fatality goes all the way back to Mortal Kombat 2. Liu Kang morphs into a massive dragon and bites the upper half of his opponent clean off. The concept was so wildly creative that it became one of the most talked about fatalities of the early 90s. A martial artist turning into a literal dragon to eat someone? Nobody had seen anything like that. It was spectacle, it was mythology, and it was brutal in a way that felt almost cartoonish enough to get away with. But here's where it gets interesting. Fast forward 30 years to Mortal Kombat 1, the 2023 reboot, and NetherRealm revisited that same concept with modern visual fidelity. The result is genuinely cinematic horror. In the updated version, Liu Kang summons twin dragons. They lunge forward, each grabbing one of the opponent's arms in their jaws, then set the opponent on fire while still holding them. You watch the skin burn in real time. Then, in one synchronized motion, the dragons pull in opposite directions and rip the opponent's head clean from their body, spine still attached, while the burning torso collapses. The scoring backs up exactly how devastating it is. It pulled a 94 out of 100 on our rubric, with perfect 10s across gore, graphic detail, and physical destruction. Those numbers put it in the top tier of every fatality across the entire franchise. The gap between the MK2 version and the 2023 version is where you really see what 30 years of graphical evolution does to a fatality. The concept was always brutal, but when you can render individual tendons snapping and a spinal column dangling from a severed head in photorealistic detail, the same idea goes from impressive arcade moment to something that genuinely makes you wince. Here's the thing that makes this fatality special beyond the gore. It feels mythic. Most fatalities are grounded in physical violence. Liu Kang's operates on a completely different level. It's supernatural, it's ancient, and the fact that it belongs to the hero, not the villain, is what elevates it. The heroes aren't gentle, they're just brutal for the right reasons. But if you think mythological dragons tearing someone apart is as creative as this list gets, wait until you see what happens when a character uses sound as a weapon. Skin deep. Most fatalities in Mortal Kombat destroy the body. Sindel's second fatality in Mortal Kombat 1 eats it. Let me explain, because this one is genuinely hard to watch. Sindel opens her mouth and unleashes a focused sound beam directly at her opponent. Not a quick blast, not an explosion. A sustained, targeted stream of sonic energy that does its work in stages. And those stages are where this fatality earns its reputation. First, the skin peels. Not all at once. Not in chunks. It separates from the muscle layer by layer, like the sound wave is vibrating the tissue apart at a frequency designed to undo a human being from the outside in. You're watching a person get unwrapped. Then the eyes pop. The pressure from the sustained sonic assault causes them to burst outward from the skull. The scoring backs this up. In terms of raw metrics, Sindel's second fatality pulls a 92 out of 100, with perfect 10s in both gore and graphic detail. The creativity score sits at 9 out of 10, and honestly, it's earned. Using sonic power as a surgical peeling tool is disturbing in a way that feels genuinely inventive. It's not just character does violent thing, it's character weaponizes her signature ability to systematically disassemble a human body, then feeds on the result. The sequential pacing of the animation is what makes it worse than a single brutal moment. Peel, pop, consume. Each stage gives you just enough time to process what happened before the next horror begins. And here's some context that makes the whole thing even more interesting. In Mortal Kombat 1's launch window, Warner Brothers faced serious backlash for selling a Halloween fatality for $10, charged at 1,200 dragon crystals. The outcry was loud enough that the publisher responded by offering 2 free seasonal fatalities to players. Sindel's brain-eating fatality isn't the paid one, but it exists in that same commercial ecosystem where individual finishing moves carry real monetary value. When a fatality is this graphically detailed, this carefully animated, this deliberately paced to maximize discomfort, it's not just content, it's a product designed to shock. One note worth flagging: the exact button input for this specific Sindel fatality isn't documented in available sources. That's an evidence gap, but the visual documentation from the gamer confirms every stage of the sequence, and players have verified it extensively since launch. But if Sindel using sound to peel someone apart feels creative, wait until you see what Raiden does with lightning, because his second fatality doesn't just kill, it splits the entire body in two, and then smashes the halves back together. Lightning split. Remember Raiden's MK2 fatality from earlier? The one where he electrocutes someone until they explode and their head flies at the camera? That was brutal for 1993. Shocking, over the top, and perfectly captured what Mortal Kombat was all about. Now, fast forward exactly 30 years, and the same character, using the same power source, does something that makes that original fatality look like a static shock. Raiden's second fatality in Mortal Kombat 1, the 2023 reboot, is one of the most visually devastating finishers in the entire franchise. He fires a concentrated lightning beam directly into the opponent's stomach. Not a quick zap, not a dramatic pose into an explosion. A sustained, targeted beam that electrically fries them from the inside out. You can see the damage happening in real time, the skin burning, the body reacting to the voltage tearing through their core, and then the beam cuts them in half. But here's the thing, that's not the fatality, that's just the setup. After the body splits, Raiden uses lightning to grab both pieces and smash them back together. Not gently, not like he's putting something back. He slams the two halves into each other with full electrical force, creating this grotesque impact where everything crushes and fuses in a single violent collision. Organs meeting organs, bone meeting bone. That detail is what separates this from every other split body fatality in the series. Plenty of characters have cut opponents in half. Kung Lao's been doing it with a hat since 1993, but nobody else destroys the body and then makes you watch the aftermath get worse. The reassembly impact is the real horror. It's not just death, it's death, then desecration, and the visual fidelity makes every frame of it land. This is 2023 Unreal Engine technology, rendering every muscle fiber, every exposed organ, every splash of blood in cinematic detail. When you compare it to the MK2 version, same character, same electricity, it's almost unrecognizable. The 1993 version was a pixelated explosion with a bouncing head sprite. The 2023 version is a photorealistic nightmare that lingers on the damage long enough to make you uncomfortable. What makes this hit so hard is the context. We already talked about Raiden's MK2 electrocution. That fatality was impressive for its era. It pushed boundaries. But standing next to the 2023 version, it becomes a perfect measuring stick for how far this series has come. Same god, same lightning, completely different level of brutality. 30 years of technological advancement turned a cool arcade moment into something that genuinely makes you wince. But as devastating as Raiden's lightning is, there's one fatality that sits above everything else on this list. One that didn't just define a character. It defined the entire franchise. And it involves a very familiar spine, the original. Every fatality on this list earned its spot. Some through sheer gore, some through creativity that made you pause the game and just stare. But none of them changed the world. This one did. Sub-Zero's spine. Ripped from the original 1992 Mortal Kombat is the simplest fatality in the franchise. He grabs his opponent by the neck, yanks upward, and rips the entire head off with the spinal cord still dangling beneath it. No cinematic camera angles, no slow motion, no X-ray zoom into shattering vertebrae. Just a pixelated fighter holding a severed head and spine while blood pools on the floor. And it scored a 96 out of 100 on our rubric. The highest combined score of any fatality in the franchise. Here's why. Perfect 10 for gore, perfect 10 for physical destruction, perfect 10 for player satisfaction. Every single metric that matters for raw brutality, the spine rip maxes out. The only category where it doesn't dominate is controversy, and even there it scores a 7 out of 10. Not because people forgot about it, because people remember it too well. Let me explain. In 1993, the United States Senate held a hearing on violence in video games. Senators sat in a wood-paneled room in Washington, D.C., and watched a clip of Mortal Kombat being played. They watched Sub-Zero rip a man's head and spine out of his body on a screen in the Capitol building. That hearing, fueled in part by this exact fatality, directly led to the creation of the Entertainment Software Rating Board, the ESRB, the rating system that is still printed on every single game sold in America today. One finishing move, one Senate hearing, one entire rating system. No other fatality on this list can say that. Liu Kang's twin dragons are more visually spectacular. Sindel's brain consumption is more graphically disturbing. Raiden's lightning bisection is more cinematically impressive. The 2023 entries benefit from 30 years of technological advancement, photorealistic rendering, and animation teams with Hollywood-level tools. And none of it matters, because none of those fatalities made Congress nervous. The spine rips mythology goes even deeper than the arcade version. When Mortal Kombat was ported to home consoles, the SNES version altered many of the fatalities entirely. Characters got freeze and shatter outcomes instead of the original gore. The spine rip looked completely different depending on which version you played, which platform you owned, which retailer you bought it from. That inconsistency became part of the legend. Kids on the playground argued about what the real version looked like. It was gaming's first urban myth built around a single move, and the community has never let it go. Major best of YouTube lists consistently feature the spine rip near the top of their countdowns. Reddit polls asking for the greatest fatality of all time see it ranked at or near number 1 with predictable consistency. Classic input data for the original Sub-Zero finishers is still archived on sites like Mortal Kombat Warehouse, preserved like historical documents, because that's what they are. Ed Boon once said, "The majority of people's reactions to Mortal Kombat fatalities is laughter, not fear." And for most fatalities, he's right. People laugh at the absurdity. They cheer at the creativity. They share clips with friends because the over-the-top violence is entertaining, not traumatizing, but the spine rip was the exception. Some reactions were fear. Congressional fear, the kind of fear that builds rating systems and reshapes an entire industry. The kind of fear that turns a video game finishing move into a piece of American legislative history. The modern fatalities are more brutal to look at, but Sub-Zero's spine rip is the most brutal fatality ever made. Not because of what it shows, because of what it did. One move, one yank, one spine, and the entire gaming industry was never the same. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.